Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 884, Garry and Richard are here, and we've got lots to talk about. New builds are back, and we've got to talk about that. We've got CES news, Gary's got some EV news, Richard's got rocket news, I've got some gadget news, and a little retro thing that's quite fun as well. So let's get straight to Garry and Richard. Garry and Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And first show of the year for you as well, Richard.
It is indeed. Yes, I'm back.
Yes. So welcome back and Happy New Year. Can we still say that? Me and Garry have already said it.
Yeah,
I can't say it again.
You can say it as often
Happy
as you
New Year,
like.
Richard.
Absolutely fine. And Happy New Year to you too. It's only the 10th of January. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Actually, apparently, technically, there are some guidelines for this, government guidelines, and when you can say Happy New Year to someone. I found out the other day, and it's the first time you see them after the New Year, you're allowed to say Happy New Year, but you're not allowed to say after that.
But it's the first time I've seen you lot, and you can't see me because my camera is off as usual. So
yeah, true.
Yeah. So we've said Happy New Year, so we don't have to do that again until next year now. That's good. Right, well, we've got lots to talk about today. We did get a builds are back. Not that much in that, but we can talk about that. And I've seen a couple of speculation on some stuff.
It's perhaps more what's missing than what's back.
Yes. And I've got a few bits and pieces that I've been playing with. There's some OpenAI news. Garry, you've looking, as Richard mentioned before we started recording, looking very sharp with your Wi-Fi. Is definitely better, so you can tell us why.
I'll tell you why. Yeah.
And Richard, you've got some Pi news as well.
Oh yeah.
I've also got a bit of CES talk as well. So we half mentioned last week, and I wasn't up to date, but I am now up to date.
Yeah. Okay. well, seeing as it's CES, let's start with that. So what have you got from CES? Car news, I think.
Well, there's car news, and there's some definitely interesting cars of sort of more use of this changing paint on cars, so you can actually change the color of the car as you drive along, or camouflage it as you go. So that's kind of, I mean, that's definitely going to come in. That's an e-ink type technology effectively for cars, and it although it seems crazy because you think that must be really expensive, it actually makes a lot of sense for the manufacturers, because painting cars is one of the most expensive things they do on production lines, and especially when they have to paint lots of different colors of cars. So if they can get color e-ink working, and at the moment the colors aren't particularly vibrant, but this actually made one of the biggest drives to getting color e-ink working properly, then someone buys a car, they just ship all the cars out in grey, and then the dealer just switches the switch when it gets to them to say what color it's going to be. And then you could pay a premium, and monthly subscriction.
I can smell a subscription model here.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
But that's basically where they're going from, because it actually works out cheaper for them to just do the one code, one thing, than having to work out having lots of different production lines to do different lots of paint. So colours are what manufacturers hate colours. This is why Mr. Ford always had his in black. It just made life a lot easier to have one production line. So that was one big thing. The other big thing which really does seem to come out of CES this year is batteries and more batteries. Particularly in the States, that there's a lot of whole house batteries, things we've talked about on the show a few weeks ago, but using a lot of the new car technology for batteries has been transferred into large scale batteries for your home. So sort of power failure batteries, which is a big thing in the States because they've had an awful lot of power failures in some of the states this year. So there's a lot of people looking for a solution for that, and these are basically replacing generators. So it's quite. But it's interesting that we're starting to see some of the technology we've been muted for cars for a long time coming to these batteries first. So things like fairly solid state batteries, not quite solid state, sort of what they call firm state, which is a mix between the old style lithium ions and the new solid state batteries. But they're safer, and they can. But the thing is, houses don't need as much capacity as cars, so you can actually produce these things at a reasonable size, which is beyond. To actually push it to the size you need for a car is a lot more work to get the technology there. So you're talking a few kilowatt hour batteries, which is more than enough to run a house overnight or for a day. So the idea is you charge on cheap, right? And then if the battery fails, this is primarily as a power failure backup.
Yeah.
So it just trickle charges ever so often. It's not used to run the house during the day. They don't have the sort of time shifting tariffs we've got here, although some states do, but most of the states don't.
So that's been used as that, but you could certainly see this coming over here as a time shifting battery. So you can have these things coming in, and the prices are coming in way down because they're mass production using them, and the technologies in there. And also there's a lot of portable battery technology, sort of large scale portable batteries. So they're actually building these into appliances. So you can actually have a battery powered fridge or a battery powered dishwasher or a battery powered. So and this is obviously aimed at certain markets, and I mean the recreational vehicle market in America is huge. So not having to have gas power or whatever on your caravan or on your not a caravan but your RV, is obviously a potential power saving. And RVs are substantially large vehicles, so putting solar panels on the roof of them also has an advantage as well. So if you've got a solar panel on your RV, you're driving along and you're charging your giant leisure battery, so it's your RV can be then powered, and that then can trickle charge all these appliances you've got, so each of them can work independently. And the idea is that you can turn up on your campsite and you take your cooker out of your caravan and place it to do your barbecue running on the battery. And you have a fridge next to it and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's the idea behind it. Anyway, whether that will take off, but batteries everywhere seem to be the thing coming out of CES, from what I can see. There are a few other things around, and Matter, which we've spoken to a few times on the show, which is the replacement for all types of home automation, does finally seem to be taking off. A lot of people are starting to talk about actually integrating Matter. What ones we'll be quite interested in. So Switchbot, I can actually have a hub with Matter built into it, their hub 2.
All right. Which
means then you'd be able to directly link things like the Amazon Alexa boxes or Google Home to that and control it without having to go through a lot of hoops. And it would be local control as well. That's the other beauty of this. It's not going out the web and coming back down, which is what currently happens with things like Switchbot. And there seem to be a lot of people talking about Matter integration. Mainly because the licensing is so easy for them to do. So it's a lot less costly licensing than some of the previous smart home iterations. But yeah, so that's good. But there's still a lot of the old stuff still out there. There's a lot of Zigbee devices and things still being pushed out there, and they're not going away. You still have to be able to support them. But it's interesting. The other thing which was really interesting was that Samsung Smart Things brought out a new hub, which I think is actually probably the best design for a smart home hub I've seen, because it's basically a wireless Qi charger you put your phone on, and at the same time it runs as your smart home hub.
That becomes your hub.
Yeah, so it's got a few things, other things than that built into it, but that seemed to be quite a good approach, and that's got Matter and Zigbee and Z-Wave and all that stuff built into it, and it does look like this switching off of the old style stuff in smart things is actually working reasonably well. There's a lot of people starting to develop edge drivers. I've not found a driver a device I can't use with the new smart things yet. But they because they haven't finished their migration, they've actually pushed back the date of when they're going to switch it off. So a lot of these manufacturers we've talked about who have flood deadlines, they can switch it off regardless of what everybody has got out there, and whether they are pushing back, and I think they sort of said 3 or 4 months down the line before they actually start turning things off, while they're still trying to get some of the bits ported, which is good. I mean, it's good to see that they're listening, that people haven't got things done yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all very good.
Yeah. I think we talked about the Intel stuff we heard from CS as well. Some new processors. It'll be a while, I think, before we see any devices sort of ship with them. Although I think that's, like we said last week, Acer and a few others announced some stuff as well. It's funny, the show now. It was a lot. It went from consumer electronics, and then in the year that we kind of went, I think, and I did check, it was 10 years since last we went. It doesn't seem that long ago, but it was. Really, PCs became at the heart of everything for a while, and I think then it's kind of drifted away. But now it's kind of part PC, but smart home is sort of the big area. But now there's these improved standards. So instead of using X11 and with a PC, you've got things like smart hubs and Alexas and that kind of thing. That sounds good. I think I'm interested to try some of the Matter stuff. Just got to, I guess, wait for it to mature a little bit before you jump into that.
Yeah, and I think it will come.
I did see some. I didn't see anything specific, but there was quite a few car type announcement. Where in fact, I did notice that I don't know. There's some other Andretti and General Motors announced that they're going into Formula One, and it was around this time, yeah. And then there was some stuff at there was some EV type stuff, some quite futuristic looking EV vehicles.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, certainly had their prototype thing they've been talking about for a few years. I mean, most of these are just sort of platforms to discuss technology rather than actually things which will come out. Although Ford's looks like it will come out. They were showing. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff around.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. I always feel a bit envious I'm not there but then I think about the travelling. I think I'm catching the walking, the travelling and the walking around. I don't miss it that much, but yeah, it was fun. Now, what else have we got? Oh, I wanted to. You mentioned we mentioned about your Wi-Fi or your signal is looking much better. So listeners, viewers on watching it on YouTube will notice the improved picture quality. So what is the reason since you moved into your garden studio? We don't call it a shed, do we? The studio.
It's a garden studio. It's the garden studio.
Yes. The video is much improved.
So it's basically the same technology as I was using last show, which wasn't working very well. And I worked out why it wasn't working well. It was because the studio, I'm using Deco mesh in the garden studio, and my mesh is laid out so the nearest other mesh point is in my lounge, which is directly in onto the studio. But this was actually connecting up to the main Deco, which is way over the other side of the building for some reason. And the problem was that the X series of Decos, which has all the Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E ones, they didn't have an option to say which Deco to connect to. They were doing it through quotes AI. And obviously that AI wasn't working particularly well because it was giving me a very low bandwidth because it was reaching so far across. Whereas if I actually did get it to occasionally connect to the studio, the one in the lounge, the connection was brilliant, as you can see now, because it is now connected to the lounge. And what's happened is I think other people must have flagged this up to TP-Link because they've released a firmware upgrade in the last week or so, and that now allows you to actually specify which Deco you want to go to. But the other thing it does, which is I think is the first time I've seen this on any of the mesh, it also allows you to prioritize each individual connected device. So for example, my laptop is now set that the Deco will only supply a 5 gigahertz channel rather than 2.4 gigahertz channel.
Right.
So it won't try and switch to a 2.4 gigahertz channel, which may appear to be stronger to it, but obviously would have potentially more interference and slower. So, and that really has made, as you can see, an absolutely huge difference to the performance of the game. So it's actually, it's not been a 10-fold increase in speed, it's been a 100-fold increase in speed on my uplink. So yeah, it's definitely an improvement. I mean, it really only affects the uplink, which is weird. Before, the downlink has never been a problem. I've always been able to see you guys clearly and hear you and everything like that, and any other team's call I'm on, that's been the case. But it's purely been the uplink which has been the problem. To do with the way the mesh works. But this is a vast improvement. They've also added a few other things in there as well. One of the things I really like now is they support dynamic DNS or various dynamic DNS with some of the services, which was one of the things which was a glaring missing thing from the routers aspect of the Deco. I mean, the Deco's always been a really good mesh network. It's always been the best router, but it's now coming up to being equivalent to other routers as well. It's got a lot of the facilities that you have on a quality router as well. So yeah, it's really good to see that, and as you can see, it's made a huge improvement.
Yeah, definitely is looking much better. Now some other subjects I wanted to get onto. One from you, Richard, talking with cameras. Is something new on the Raspberry Pi front?
Oh yes, this is the new camera module on the Raspberry Pi. I mean, there's obviously we're familiar with the version 1, version 2 camera module and the HQ one, which came out relatively recently. This is a camera module 3, which I think this has come out this week, and obviously it's got the usual things like bumps in megapixel counts. I think it's up to 11.9 megapixels now, but I think there's a couple of variants. There's a standard and a wide. The wide having a much wider field of view. I think it's up to 102 degrees horizontal, up from 66 on the normal one, which is again slightly up on the 62 from the version 2 module. But what I found most interesting was the autofocus, which is now motorized, which I think is quite a. I mean, that's quite a pro level. Well, it's it's quite a jump, and I think that's actually for me the most exciting thing about this. I mean, it being a Pi, it's relatively inexpensive. It's still, I think, the basic one is still around $25, I think, although the wide view is, I think, up to $35. So it's less than the HQQ. It's less than the HQQQ one, but it's still, I think, affordable. But I think the motorized focus for me is the interesting thing, because that does open up a lot more things you can do with it. So yeah, a new thing. It's good to see that I don't think we're going to see a Pi 5 for a while. I think the supply issues around the Pi 4 are still rumbling along. There is one nasty there with the camera module 3. I don't believe you can use it with the Pi 400, which is obviously the all-in-one device, which I think is a real shame. Yeah, well, it's which is a real shame, because that's been the device that if you're a newish Pi, then that's kind of been the one that I found easiest to get hold of. So, but I think it's because of the available connectors, whereas of course the existing Pi is it's all very accessible. The other thing is, in common with many of these things, I think they've promised to keep it in production until, is it 2030? I think so. It's it'll be very useful for industry as well. But I think I can see a lot of uses for a higher definition camera, particularly one with decent autofocus. Not just for hobbyists, but also I can think you can see how there could be applications in the industry, into Internet of Things, and it's not a bad camera. Yes, I can see you've got some on the screen there. I mean, it's not a bad little camera, really. And again, it's relatively cheap and easy to play with, and so that's the Raspberry Pi news today.
And that would make it quite good for we're talking smart home security cameras last week.
Well, exactly.
Quite good for something like that.
I mean, security cameras, you can easily see it being used in industry. Maybe slightly disturbingly, be better for facial recognition, that kind of thing as well, or just object recognition, full stop. So it's a good upgrade, I think. And again, they've managed to keep the price relatively low, despite all the constraints that obviously we're all under with relation to supply chain and increasing prices. So it's good to see it still being kept at an affordable level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a nice little unit.
And yes, I have one on order.
Of course you have. But not on your Pi 400. You could. But I think I've still got it's a 3 I've got.
I've got two Pi 4s. I've got two Pi 400s. Yeah, I've got a really bad Raspberry Pi habit. Really, just I mean, it was lucky for me when the supply chain did crunch, because I just thought, I'll just get another one, because the problem is that they cost as much as a few pints of beer in local pubs. So you think, I could have another night out drinking beer, or I could get myself another toy, and the toy kept winning.
I think this one that I've got here is a Pi 4. So so I've got a 4 and a 400. So
is that a 2 gig or an 8 or a 4 gig?
No, it's the smallest
2 gig version.
Small, it's the Model B. Yeah, the 2 gig. I think I went. One's Windows 11.
I don't think the Windows 11 hack, as I understand it, I think the most memory that could use is 3 gigs, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, even the 400 only uses that.
Yeah,
this is the one I have my little screen on.
I mean, I should put out, I'm still quite happy with the Windows on dev box, even though the waking up on the display port is starting to get irritating now. That it will not wake up without a hard reset if it's plugged into the display port. Works fine going through FireWire. Does not work when going through DisplayPort. I'm not quite sure why it needs a hard reset. So, but I gather from the forums I'm not alone with that.
No, actually, they did fix, and we talked about. I mentioned at the beginning of the show there were some builds, and we did get a build last week. And one of the fixes was for ARM, which was the resume from hibernation, or whatever it was called, the black screen issue. That's been fixed with the 25272.
But that's that's a dev channel, channel, isn't it? Yeah. So I mean, I'm trying to keep this as production as I can. So I'm not going to do it.
Well, the bug was introduced in the dev channel and then fixed a few weeks later. So I don't think this is specifically a fix. This isn't a fix for your issue. This was another issue that was introduced in the dev channel. So by avoiding the dev channel, you haven't had this issue. So you don't need to fix.
But I've got the issue.
Yes, we had 25272 last week, first build of the year, and there wasn't a huge amount. They've moved Quick Assist around, and they've taken away a feature.
They have taken away two things, haven't they? They've removed the suggested action when you're doing copy text, where we're basically kind of fire up Edge, and it looks as though they've removed the inbox version of the Windows subsystem for Linux. Although I think it's only WSL2 they've removed. I mean, Garry, I don't know if you got more information on this, but it looks like, because obviously WSL1, that I think will have to be there forevermore now, because it's kind of part of the OS.
Yeah, it's part of the OS. WSL2 was never meant to be part of the OS, as far as the rumors I've heard. So I think this is the move to make it. You're going to get it in the store if you want it.
Yeah, which again, I mean, which makes sense, because it's, when it's not part of the core OS, and it's much easier for them to update it like many inbox apps. As if they aren't part of the core OS, and they can make changes and tweak things without, which I think they'd always planned to do. As you say, it's kind of shouldn't really have been part of the core OS, but I gather it has now been pulled with this dev channel build. Ian's gone.
You're quiet. You're very quiet, Ian.
Sadly, Ian, my lip reading is not what it was.
I muted myself to cough, and it wouldn't unmute.
And you're
there we go. I think the idea is, I think if you install it, the way that they go through the link on the post, it stays installed. Then it's just on new builds. You wouldn't get it.
Yeah, which is fair enough. A lot of people don't want it anyway. So I mean, talking to some admins and people, they really don't want to have people installing WSL2.
Yeah, I think it was always an optional component, but I think this last few builds removed it for you, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah,
which I think caused some. Yeah, I'm looking at GitHub. It appears to have caused some confusion. It suddenly just disappeared.
Yeah,
which I think caused some upset. And again, quite clear how to add it back. And again, just in case anyone's forgotten, it's the dev channel.
Yeah, exactly.
No guarantee things will keep on working. They're going to play with it and change things. So good to see things are happening in the dev channel, I guess, even if it may be a bit inconvenient sometimes.
yeah, exactly. Because the rest of the changes weren't very excited. But like you said, removing the suggested actions, there were some fixes on it as well. But all the interesting stuff is on the beta channels at the moment. That's where they're playing with all the boxes, isn't it? And
yeah, they've got some rounded boxes and things. The search box, they're filling with the search box yet again. That's got rounded corners. Oh dear, yeah. So they are tinkering with the betas. I think it's this is the one where is it build 22621 and 22623 gets a bit confused as to which one you're gonna get. Oh, there we go. It's up. Yeah. So so
you've got rounded corners on that search box there, as opposed to square corners, how it is on the release version.
Yeah, except they're not quite the same rounded corners as you got in the actual corner of the start menu itself. And then the command buttons have got different rounded corners again. So it's good to see consistency.
Well, it's to match the search button. That's the idea.
But there's different buttons. Oh, goodness me. I despair sometimes. I mean, yeah, great. They can match the search button there, but I do wish they'd be consistent, because it's like, because you can even see in that screenshot there, you have on the screen there, you've got the all apps button, different shape again. I mean, make your mind up, guys. Please make your mind up. Decide what you're going to do and stick to it. I mean, for what it's worth, I have no problem at all with the Windows 11 interface. It's fine. But I wish this level of tinkering would stop, because it's just looking. I had high hopes that with Windows 11 we'd see a more consistent approach to the OS, and yet it seems they're just changing bits but not changing other bits. You can't change some bits and not change all of it. And this being the beta, we're very close to release as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, and apparently, I've seen a couple of threads about some other hidden changes in here, but as ever, I generally avoid those, because Microsoft have some of these features in the builds but not turned on, and they're usually not turned on for a reason, because they're not ready. But I've seen that they've got more File Explorers getting a bit of XAML refresh, or that kind of look and feel to it, but I have to wait and see, because that's not come from Microsoft. That's just people digging around inside the builds and maybe finding something that was never intended to be found. But yeah, I think there's still tinkering going on. Certainly for the dev channel ones. Maybe the beta ones are the ones that should be a bit more stable. But like you said, they do like to tinker with boxes.
They do indeed.
And also, we've got an update today. WSA, Windows Subsystem for Android, has been updated to Android 13 today for Windows Insiders. So if you update yours, you get the Android 13 version on your system.
But that's not the full Google Android 13, is it? It's still the
open source.
13.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can install your apps if you jump through a few hoops, or you can get the ones from the Amazon store, which work fine. You just install those, but with a fairly limited set. Like I said, each time we kind of say this is a great technology, but who uses it? I use it occasionally for the Arlo camera app, which is obviously going I'll lose that feature once they kill my cameras off. So that probably
yes.
Yes, and the Twinkly app, I use it for that as well. But there's a limited set. But if you're a developer, then I'm guessing that is quite handy to have a full version of Android able to test stuff. I don't know, Gary, is that something, or do you have better ways of testing stuff?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, if you tried to debug in and try to debug in using this, it's like chalk and cheese.
Oh, yeah, I think your Deco is speaking to another device.
It is indeed. Gary's
he's back.
frozen.
Oh, he's back.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I probably do know what that was. I was just trying to run some diagnostics and it probably froze. I was just saying that having a full version of Android is a really useful thing.
Yeah, I thought it. Yeah, probably so. So maybe that's who it's for. And sometimes these things come out of someone within the Microsoft dev teams. I wish we had a full version of Android that I could just run on Windows, and that project gets greenlit that way. You never know. But yeah, that's come out today, so you can pick that up. And talking to Microsoft, there's no. Did you see this? We talked about AI before Christmas, on our Christmas show, and we talked about OpenAI and that GPT chat thing. Did you see that Microsoft are planning an investment in OpenAI?
Yeah. Bring it into Word and products.
Yeah. Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit there, Garry. But yeah, Richard, did you see that? See how much they were going to invest in it?
Yeah, it's billions, isn't it? Billions and billions of dollars. And
10 billion.
Although they do expect to get some money back from OpenAI's profits, don't they? So it's kind of an investment, except they expect to get a return on an investment. And they're going to. Is it a 49% stake they're going to get as well? I think
it sounds like a Dragon's Den deal to me.
Yeah.
We'll take our percentage down when we get our money back. But they didn't go on Dragon's Den. They just they used the AI and said, should we buy an AI engine?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a potential deal, isn't it? It's not confirmed or anything yet. It's not official. It's kind of been floated as an idea, whether or not it actually happens. Because I mean, right now, it's for that amount of money, it seems an awful lot. Because as I understand it, every time someone uses Chat GPT, doesn't OpenAI basically lose money? It's not a money maker. It loses money. So although Microsoft are quite adept at shall we say, making money out of things. No. Well, unless you count Windows Phone, Nokia, but they are quite adept at sort of changing tech to actually make it profitable. So be interesting to see what they would do. I think OpenAI, it does use Azure at the moment, doesn't it? I think, looking at Garry here. Yeah, Gary's nodding. That's good. So
this isn't the tech cause problems I talked about. This is actually my laptop. It's gone crazy.
Okay. Well, so as I understand it, OpenAI, it's kind of shifting to Azure anyway. So that there's it's an interesting place for Microsoft to get involved in, because I think there's the ethics around ChatGPT and OpenAI is still somewhat open to question. I think I'd be a little bit cautious, because I mean, let's face it, it's creating content, but that content is being created based on models it's been trained on. So it's exactly who owns it, the copyright. There's a lot of things around it. It's all very clever and wonderful. I mean, we did that wonderful quiz you did a few weeks ago with the song lyrics. It's very, very clever. It's very impressive. But there is the question where this is coming from. So I think there are still some questions around ethics. But I mean, let's face it, Microsoft has been going this way. We've seen Copilot in GitHub, which I know is a far simpler way working. But again, that will basically take sort of natural type language and turn it into code. So again, it seems to be a logical way whereby, I mean, it's not. I don't think it's going to be around Bing, is it? It's more around kind of just using it in Office itself. So Bing and Office as well. So Bing too. So I mean, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think I'll still have to file this under speculation at the moment until there's been some sort of confirmation from Microsoft, because I think there'd be a lot of due diligence to do around this. Because there are ethical issues. It's a very clever tech, but again, I'm not 100% clear on where it's getting its models from at the moment, and how the training is happening, and if there be any long-term issues, because it's certainly very impressive and very clever. But we'll see what Microsoft actually does if this does come to fruition. I mean, if it does, as I believe they plan to do it this year, aren't they? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, it's quite. I think it's rated sort of the 7th most money they've spent on a investment, something like that, off on their list of purchases, if it goes ahead.
Yeah, well, it's certainly got some. It's. I mean, the ChatGPT has got an awful lot of media traction at the moment. So it's. And again, you can see how it'll be a handy search engine or query engine, but
we'll see. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah. Now, some other bits and pieces I've got. Oh, I did see one other story from Windows Central saying that Microsoft have scrapped plans for a dual screen Surface Duo 3, and instead of going for a foldable design. I don't know if you've seen that story today.
Oh, this is Zach Bowden, yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's an interesting story. I'm not sure if there's nothing. It's one of those things sources have said.
Yes.
So it could be someone floating an idea within Microsoft. Personally, I think it'd be a shame if they did this, because Samsung are doing this already and doing it quite well. I quite like the Surface Duos.
I love the dual screen approach. Yeah, I mean, I use the dual screen approach all the time. Whereas
this does smack a little bit of Me Tooism. So basically the story Zach's put up on Windows Central is that dual screen design that we like, it has been scrapped. It's going. They're going to go down. They're going to head down the path for foldable, a true foldable. Again, Samsung springs effortlessly to mind, as does Huawei and a few others are doing that. I mean, I don't know if Apple are planning to do a foldable phone at some point. I mean, I'm never too sure about the foldable phones. Although that said, I was very impressed with the Samsung. Is it the Z Flip? I think
that's what my son's gone up. Yeah, he really likes it. Yeah,
and that's actually pretty cool, because it just folds down. It's kind of almost a more useful way of folding these things down, because it just fits in the pocket better. Whereas these things fold into quite a hefty slab. So we'll see. But I think, they were aiming to ship the original one this year, which means if they are scrapping it, I presume it's going to push them into 2024, which is a hell of a long time to be without a refresh.
Yeah, I wondered if this is a way of putting a positive spin on the fact that they've scrapped the Surface Duo 3. And that's kind of the end of the road for it. And they said, oh, yes, but we are pivoting to another design, which we'll see at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think you could be right. I mean, I think this could be the sign of this. This could easily be a way of floating the idea of getting rid of it.
Because if they were intended to pivot or come up with a different design, you wouldn't cancel the Duo 3 that you've completed the design and then wait a year for this other thing. You would ship the Surface Duo 3, wouldn't you? And then you'd ship the other one in the year after.
Yeah, I mean, one other interesting thing that Zach said in his piece is around the expansion of the Android phone line. So you'd have some traditional Android phones in there, as well as the more enthusiast targeted foldable, which would at least allow them to get some fairly high-end specs or high-end tech out there quite quickly. But then again, I'm not sure Microsoft's Android offering is necessarily strong enough to differentiate it from the rest of the market, because again, I think of Samsung, which have got a very good story to tell. Google's tried to do their own phone with a Pixel, which has met with some success, but not a colossal amount. So I'd worry that again, unless Microsoft has got something particularly impressive, I think just an ordinary Surface branded Android phone. So what?
Yeah. Unless it really integrates into Windows and everything else. I found that as a standalone phone, the Note 20 was a good phone with Microsoft services. OneDrive was already integrated on it. I prefer the Duo because of the dual screen, but if if it was only a single screen and it was the same form factor as the Note, I would choose the Note because Samsung's ecosystem is better than Microsoft. So yeah, and I think you mentioned about the fact that Google find it hard to compete with Samsung with their platform. I think it's going to be much harder for Microsoft to do so.
Well, exactly, and I mean, it's what I always find amusing is people saying, well, it'd be good because it means that where Apple has the Apple Mac and the iPhone and things, and they link together very well and connect together well, then you have the Microsoft devices or Windows, and you have Surface phones, but I mean. Thinking about it, historically, Microsoft tended to support phones that weren't Surface Duos first. They tended to support Samsung phones and other phones first before, and Android devices. Which, there's, I'd like to know what's going on within Microsoft. I mean, I have to say at this point, it would be a real shame if this is true and they are ditching that hinge in favour of just another foldable phone and some slabs, because I think you're losing one of the big differentiators, really. Which is, I think would be a shame, because one of the things I've always liked about the Surface line of devices is not so much being the fact they're particularly, the hardware is wonderful, or they've sold loads. It's more the fact that they've shown other makers, here's what you can do. You can do it this way, and I think that's actually really helped with laptops and things in the Windows world. Suddenly we're seeing, laptops that are really cool with, But with the phones, Microsoft hasn't, they did the Duo, which I think was a nicer way of saying, here's a way you can build a cool phone. If they just do phones that are like everyone else's, I'd worry that they're going to tarnish the Surface brand. Why would you buy one? And unless they're so embedded in the ecosystem that you've really got no choice. But I think a lot of software would have to change for that to happen. But we'll see.
We'll see. Now, I did do a few reviews this week, so there's a few things to check out. One that I found quite handy. This, I think I talked about last week, but this is a wireless USB, a USB and wireless MIDI interface. So there's the DIN plugs that go into your keyboard, like one behind me there. So anybody doesn't know, MIDI is the musical instrument digital interface. It's the 80s technology that's still in use now to communicate.
It's why so many people bought Atari STs.
Yes, exactly, because it had this very port on it. Yeah.
Some had two of those ports on it.
yeah, well, it had in and out, didn't it? So I've wanted to test this because I've moved some stuff onto these racks here, and
your background's changed.
Yes, they're it's real. It's not fake. So I've got the keyboards over there, which means you've got to run cables backwards and forwards. So it's wireless. So it plugs into your MIDI in and out. There's a dongle that plugs into the PC side. If you've got a Mac or an iOS device, you don't need that dongle. That already supports it through Bluetooth. So you plug this in, and that's your MIDI. So no need to run a big thick cable around the room. It was 15 quid, so I wanted to see if it worked, and it does. This is rechargeable. So you plug it in a micro USB to charge it up. And well, I've used it for probably about 10 hours, something like that, without charging it up, and then I just put it on charge and I finish with it. And it's great. It works really well. I tried to check the latency out. So on the video, I did check that because some people get hung up on latency of these kind of things. So if your drum beats, a a quarter of a bar to beat too later where it sounds all crazy. So I did check it with wired and wireless. So you can see that in the video, but I didn't notice any latency. There is some, but it's not audible. And you can account for that anyway if you really bothered. But anyway, it works. So save running the cable around. Check that video out. It's nice and cheap and it works. And of course, it means that you can. It's the USB side plugs into your PC, so you don't need a MIDI interface on your PC. This is just one end. This is one end. Your PC is the other end. So if you've got a laptop and you want to do some music stuff, and the device you've got hasn't got a USB, then this kit will do the job. And
looking behind you, I can see your Yamaha keyboard on the shelf. So
yes,
I was very impressed with the demo tape.
Yeah. So this demo tape, I was in the loft. I'm clearing out the loading room loft, and I came across my box of tapes. And in here is the Yamaha X-PERIENCE demo tape, which my grandfather sent for me in 1986, because I was wanting one of these keyboards, which I have got, which is up at the top. But this demo tape, so I uploaded it to SoundCloud. I didn't think anybody from Yamaha would be really too upset if a copyright. I can remove it if anybody gets really offended by me uploading it. But it is absolutely hilarious. Side one is not too outrageous. It's just like a demo of the sounds.
Sounds like the cheesiest 80s radio station I've ever heard.
Side two is a fake radio station. So side one is just demos of here's a banjo, and it's kind of not that bad. Side two is ultimate cheese 80s with versions of Tears for Fears, Star Wars theme done in the most 80s version of Star Wars theme you've ever heard. Phil Collins and some made up stuff as well, but the DJ does a fake American accent. He does a quiz in it and some quips, and it's absolute cheese fest. So even if you're not interested in the DX100,
I have to recommend it. It was I was laughing and laughing and laughing. It was so good.
It did remind me of my days on hospital radio.
Garry was that DJ.
I probably was that DJ. Yeah.
Did you put on the fake American accent?
No, I didn't do the fake American accent.
So anyway, good news is I've got another audio clip to upload, which is this is a DX7S tape from a couple of years later. It's not as exciting as this one because it doesn't have a radio station on it. But actually, I needed a tape player, obviously, to play those on. And so I've got my Denon over here, my Denon hi-fi thing, which I think I'd last used 15, 20 years ago. Pulled it down, went to press play, and nothing. The things went round and nothing played. It wasn't working. And because tape heads weren't being lifted into position. So if you remember, you remember the old cassette players used to, as you press play, it pushed the heads up. Well, on these hi-fi ones, it's a solenoid that does that. So I managed to track down the solenoid, spray it with some grease thing, electrical grease, and it amazingly it fixed it. It worked. So my tape player is working. So now I've got a box of tapes down there to listen to, because some are labeled, some aren't. It's mainly me messing about on stuff, so I'm going to have a listen to that. I have got my copy of Medal and some other stuff on there, which I probably won't bother digitizing those because you can get those on Spotify. But anyway, that was a find, the DX100 tape. So have a listen to that. And I also posted another video today with a little audio mixer. So I can't really show you that, but another thing is for every keyboard you put, there's another cable to run around the room, audio cable. So that's a submixer, but it's powered by USB-C. So you can power it from a PC or from a plug, or in fact you can power it from a battery pack as well, or whatever So if you were out and you wanted a little mini mixer and you didn't have a plug socket, you could power it from a phone, phone charge type portable charger sort of thing. So I've got a video of that as well. So I tested the noise floor on it, and it seemed okay. So those are the things. So I've got some tapes to digitize, but I don't think I'll put everybody through listening to my tapes of me playing a DX100 from 1988. I don't think anybody really wants to listen to that. I might make the family listen to it and tie them down in chairs. Remember the Vogan poetry in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yes.
So I might do Vogan poetry for them. I have got a couple. I got that new synthesizer a few weeks ago. I've got a couple of tracks. I think I put a version of one last week at the end of last week's show, but they're actually going on Spotify this week, so I'll include a link for those. Which done, one of them is done completely with this new synth, with all the sounds that I made up for it as well. So there weren't any presets. I just created the sounds and then wrote the track around it. So it's really, really good. I came across this sound that I made. Do you remember the old Tomorrow's World theme, the 80s one, not the 70s one?
Yeah.
That vocal sound that comes in. I managed to recreate that sound, so I've used that. Yeah, it's very it's an amazing synth. I've spent a lot of time
looking forward to
with it.
the next album then. Yeah.
Yes, well, I've got all the tracks now done for that, so just a question of uploading. So 2 tracks will be available this week, and then the album will be in a few weeks' time. I think we had a final story from Richard. Something you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. This is because as you know, I do tend to follow rockets and things.
Yes.
I think we should probably make a note of the UK supposed launch that didn't really happen last night. It's the Virgin Orbit thing where it's debatable as to whether or not you'd even call it a UK launch, because of course it's a rocket strapped onto the wing of a ex-Boeing 747 or a retired Boeing 747, which took off from Newquay, flew out. I think it was probably closer to Ireland than to the UK mainland when the actual drop happened. So this is a launch where it's a rocket strapped to 747. It flies out up to 40,000 feet. It also drops it, and the rocket ignites. And this was a much hoo-ha yesterday and day before about this being the first launch. Obviously, it was heavily delayed. It was supposed to go last year. Regulation, technical problems, what have you, delayed it. So it was supposed to go yesterday. It went up, but then unfortunately, it didn't work. Which is obviously it's really bad news for all those people in the UK who developed the satellites and spacecraft that were supposed to be launched on this. I think it was probably 6 different payloads in total, including one for the UK, the Prometheus 2 stuff. I gather the first stage worked, second stage kind of worked, shut down early. I don't think it began again, and then it re-entered and burnt up, and that was that. So it is unfortunate because again, not least because of the lost work. But I must admit, I had mixed feelings about it, simply because it wasn't really a launch from UK soil. It was a 747 taking off from the UK and then flying out over the Atlantic and then letting a rocket go. Which, I mean, yes. I've seen 747s taken off from UK soil for the last 50 years or so. So, and of course,
I tend to agree with you. I don't think it could be classed as a UK launch.
I think the thing is, and there's been spacecraft rockets launched from beneath aircraft anyway. What springs to mind is the Pegasus, obviously, which is air launched from an old Lockheed Martin TriStar, I think. And of course, there's Virgin Galactic's own spaceship too, which gets dropped. Although that again hasn't flown for quite some time either. So, I mean, this was obviously a liquid fuel rocket. I think it's a great shame. It's almost unfortunate that it got quite so much publicity, and people had to, it took off from Cornwall from Newquay Airport. I think about 10 o'clock UK time last night. The rocket dropped at 11, but of course you wouldn't have seen the rocket being released, because of course it happened over Ireland. So if you're in Cornwall, you'd have seen a 747's lights disappearing in the distance, and that would have been that. Perhaps more excitingly, there are some vertical launches planned for this year. I gather Sutherland and Saxonwood in Scotland are due to do some vertical launches. The Sutherland, I think, is Sky Aurora, which is Edinburgh based, and I think. No, Sutherland is Orbex, I think. But they're both vertical launch systems going from Scotland, and they're probably, I think, more interesting to see. Although one has to accept that they're going to probably have some technical problems on their first launch, because first launches are always hard. With Virgin Orbit, it's its 6th launch, but I mean, they've now had 2 failures out of six launches, which is not great. I mean, it's not unheard of for a startup to have these issues, but I mean, it could well cause some financial issues for them. But I think people looking to see a UK launch, it's probably best to look forward to the ones from Scotland, because they are, they'll be vertically launched rockets off UK soil in the same way that the Black Arrow launched from Australia in the early 70s before the UK shut down its launcher program. So. And the other positive to take out of the Virgin Orbit failure is the fact that it has meant they've now got the legislation in place, and they know how to do the licensing in order to allow launch to occur. So good news from that point of view. But my heart goes out to those people that worked on the satellites and spacecraft that obviously been lost as part of this failure.
Yeah, that must be really heartbreaking. You go through all that, but then that's the nature of it, almost, isn't it?
Exactly, and that they would have been. I mean, I'm sure they would have been insured, but I know people who work on these spacecraft, and they do pour their hearts and souls into it, and it's just a shame it failed. Although it's also a shame it was perhaps plugged quite so heavily as a launch from UK soil when it wasn't really launching from UK soil. It was near a cork.
Yeah. Well, at least you keep up with it and bring us up the latest news on this.
I wish it was better news.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's everything for this week's show, unless you've got anything else you want to finish off with. No, I think that's it for this week's show. So I was going to try and share I've got the artwork actually that I did for the thing. I can share my screen finally. So I'm going to play out with some music. So there's the artwork for the tracks, Digital Modifier and Digital Paradise.
Is that another one of your OpenAI things?
Yes, it's another AI.
Very evocative.
Yes, I quite like that one. I spent ages going through different things and put different parameters in until I got what I liked. But and the digital thing alludes to the fact that these new tracks are written on the digital synth rather than the analog, which I've been using for some previous tracks as well. So I'm going to play out with one called Digital Paradise, which is someone described it as like music for like going through space through. So I think it's probably it's quite kind of mellow. So the idea is one up and one down. So the modifier is up and the Paradise one is down. So I'll include the Paradise one, and you can check out. You can see some of the other artwork which I came up with as well. There's one as well, but I went with that one. And there you go. There's the DistroKid image. Right, so Richard, where can we find you now, or should I just include the link that I did for last time?
I would include the Mastodon link because I can't remember what it is.
Yeah. Yes, I can't remember mine either. Garry, where can we find you? You're still going on your Twitter, eh?
I've still got Twitter at Garry WA, and also Garry WA at mass.to.
Yeah. And on your YouTube channel, which is EV Owner.
EV Owner, yeah, and I will actually get some material up there. I was planning to do that over the Christmas break, but just to get a chance. I've got my year in review of my EV6 coming up, so that'll be good. It was supposed to be 9 months in review, but it's now going to be a year.
Yeah, well, why not? Right, well, we'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me in@thislifestyle.com, and see you next week.
Yeah, sure, yeah.